Hello everyone, and welcome to The Build Show. I'm John Peitzman, JP, Certified High Performance Coach and creator of the Build Framework. I help individuals and teams all over the world thrive in their personal and professional lives. And as your host on this show, our aim is to help transform lives one guest at a time. And we do that how? By having amazing guests. And today is no different. We have with us Azim Khamisa. Following the murder of his son in 1995, Azim Khamisa founded the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, which started a subsequent forgiveness movement that has reached millions globally. He has received over 80 local, national, and international awards. He is an emissary of peace and an international inspirational speaker with over 700 keynotes and over 1,000 student presentations. He is the author of 5 books, including Murder to Forgiveness, From Forgiveness to Fulfillment, From Fulfillment to Peace, The Secrets of the Bulletproof Spirit, and Leadership for the Greater Good. He has been featured countless times in local, national, and international media, and it is my true privilege to welcome him as a very special guest on our show here today. Joining us all the way from the United States of America via video technology, Azim, welcome to The Build Show. So privileged to have you with us here today. And before we jump into the build framework and kind of walk through that, I would love to know, kind of as we sit here having this conversation, what you're most excited about right now in your life.
Well, the Tariq Khamisa Foundation you mentioned on my resume, and thank you for having me, by the way. Honored to be here. We just started last month in October, our 28th year. And we're based in San Diego. And we have a safe school model, which has 4 programs for youth. We specialize from 4th grade to 9th grade. You know my story. So the kid who killed my son joined a gang in 6th grade and took my son's life in 8th grade. So it's a time of the adolescence. And the safe school model, we have 3 levels of it. The first one is for 4th and 5th. The second is for 6th and 7th. The third level is for 8th and 9th. And then we have a program for parents, which we designed in partnership with Berkeley University at their invitation. And during COVID, we've also created a program for teachers based on restorative practices. So we opened, we stayed very focused on this particular population and in San Diego, and the results have been pretty exemplary. And we now have, over 100 schools waiting for our program. Wow. And we are finally going national. We have a second site in Pennsylvania, and we opened a year ago last May a third site in Colorado. So what I'm most excited about is to bring our safe school model to hopefully every school in the United States and sometime beyond that. And maybe our program can preempt another Uvalde or Sandy Hook tragedy.
Very, very exciting, very moving, and I would love to help you take this all the way to Australia as well and around the world, because it's needed not just in the United States, but it's a global phenomenon for sure.
I've spoken to students in Australia several times. I think I've been down there 6 times and spoken in Brisbane and Adelaide and Perth, again to students in this age group. So wonderful country. So. Yes, I have very good memories from my visits over there.
Yes, well, and hopefully you'll be back soon. As we dive into the build framework now, what I'd love to do, Azim, is to really look at it through the lens of delivering excellence. In the build framework, the heart connection. We have a heart connection for all of the areas, and the heart connection for delivering excellence is to feel it, and it's about that heart connection. And for those of you who, by the way, need a reminder of what BUILD is all about, BUILD is an acronym. It stands for Build Relationships, Understand the Business, Implement Strategies, Lead and Inspire, and Deliver Excellence. And as I said, if we kind of take our conversation and focus on deliver excellence and really apply that lens to the other areas, I think it's so important for people to understand from your unique perspective how you can actually have that open heart of excellence in everything that you do. You know, I've heard you talk on several of occasions, and the talks that you have that are out there, there's so many of them, and I'm paraphrasing of course, but when you talk about how your heart was broken, and I can't as a parent imagine something breaking your heart more than what happened to you and the murder of your son, and yet you say that it was in that broken heart that your heart was open. And it's only with an open heart that we can allow for love and compassion to come in and actually give that as well. So I think that it would be an amazing conversation, Azim, to look at that kind of concept of the open heart and the ability to deliver excellence in the different areas of build, starting with relationships, because there were so many relationships that you had to literally keep your heart open with to move things forward. So can you talk about how maybe that was part of your story, keeping an open heart with relationships, and as importantly, like some guidance to our listeners on how they can do the same thing as it relates to building relationships in their lives?
Yeah, I think it's critical to have an open heart. I did not quite know that till my tragedy when my son was murdered by a 14-year-old gang member, very random. And I was able to see that there were victims at both ends of the gun, and forgave my son's killer and invited his grandfather and guardian to join me in the work of the Tariq Khamisa Foundation. But it starts there, where one of my quotes is that there's nothing quite so painful as a broken heart. There's nothing quite so painful as a broken heart, but a broken heart is an open heart. Mm-hmm. If one can learn to live with an open heart, gentle transformations begin to manifest. So I work very, very hard to keep my heart open, Tom. I remember giving a talk in Kalamazoo, Michigan, to a bunch of parents that also had lost children. And I started with this quote because I could see a lot of broken heart in my audience. And at the end of my talk, a visiting scholar, I remember his name, Mark Nepo, came up to me and said, you know, your opening quote was very moving. It reminded me a quote by Rumi. And since you are a Sufi, I'm sure you know this quote. So I told Mark, I said, you know, Rumi was very prolific. He had 150,000 quotes. I don't remember all of them. But remind me which one. And he says, well, Rumi said, and I think this is very poignant, that God will break your heart over and over and over and over and over and over again until it stays open. I thought, wow. So I think that one way to not have your heart broken is to make sure it is open. And I think it takes an open heart not only to have a more loving relationships, but to then be able to receive and deliver love and compassion and forgiveness. You can't forgive with a closed heart. You can't offer love or compassion or empathy. All of that it needs an open heart. But we tend to be in a very judging society, at least in the United States we are, and probably Australian society is similar to the US if you look around the world. We are very quick to judge. And I believe that that probably is one of the biggest impediments in terms of trying to live with an open heart. I mean, I've been very fortunate, Tom, having done this work for 27 years now. I've met some amazing human beings. Like I met His Holiness the Dalai Lama half a dozen times. And the first time I met him, we were hosted by Pope John Paul in 2004 at his summer palace in Castel Gandolfo, which is about an hour away from the Vatican. And he only invited 30 people to participate in a 5-day synthesis dialogue conference. I was lucky to be one of them because there was an amazing group of amazing people. And one of the things that he talked about, which I think is relevant to this conversation about open heart, is that every emotion has a frequency. And there are certain emotions that have a very low frequency, and then there are certain frequencies that have a very high frequency. So for instance, judgment, hate, anger, resentment, greed, avarice are very low frequencies. Happiness doesn't reside there. And then you have emotions that are very high frequencies, like goodwill, friendship, trust, respect, gratitude, empathy, compassion. Forgiveness is right there with love. Those are the high vibratory emotions. And the only way you are able to have those high vibratory emotions is to have an open heart. But happiness lives there. Now, when you meet somebody like him, he's vibrating at those high frequencies 24/7. But us mortals all have a bad hair day and you get angry, right?
Right.
Well, happens to yours truly too. And I meditate 2 hours a day now. I used to do an hour when my son was alive. And when that happens to me and I fall off from a high frequency emotion to a low one, I add another half an hour and get back up here. But one thing I can share with you and your audience is that having done this work now for 27 plus years, I am spending more time in these high vibratory emotions and having my heart open. And when I'm here, I'm happier, I'm healthier, I'm more in the flow of life.
Amazing. Such wisdom in everything that you just said. And I think you're right. It's an ongoing process. And that's what I love about what you just shared. It's that, it's a day by day thing in a way, right? And you have to keep at it. You have to, you've been doing 27 years, right? I've been doing for decades different practices, and others have their journey as well. But it's not like you arrive somewhere and then you stop, because then you just go backwards, right? It's a daily mindful practice of this ability to stay in that high frequency.
I mean, there is no limit of how open your hearts can be. There's no limit. And here's the beauty of it, that this is not a destination, it is a journey. And it's not complicated, Tom, to know where are you vibrating at any given time, right? You can catch yourself. And if you understand that when you are vibrating at these low frequencies, well, what? You've closed your heart. You're not healthy, right? You're not going to be happy. You're not going to be in the flow of life. But if you can get back to living with those high vibratory emotions, that will open your heart. And if you can continue to work on it, as you pointed out, on a daily basis, you get better at it. Like anything else, practice makes you perfect. So yeah, I think you could be stopped at a traffic light and you can check in and say, where am I vibrating at?
Yes.
Right? So it's not that complicated. It's a question of being aware and to be mindful of your emotions and to understand the importance of these high frequency emotions, because that will keep your hearts open. And obviously, if you have an open heart, your relationships are going to get better, whether it is with your significant other, your children, your peers, your community. People pick up on that, pick up on the fact that you are, vibrating at those high vibratory emotions, even if you don't say a word. That energy does communicate.
So moving on to now applying the lens of delivering excellence to understanding the business, how would you, instruct or inspire all of our audience today to apply this open heart, delivery of excellence to the concept of understanding the business of either the business of business and or the business of life?
Well, I think business is really relationship, isn't it? I mean, and when you are in relationships, your relationships are much stronger and the bond is much tighter when you have an open heart. As I mentioned earlier, I forgave my son's killer, invited his grandfather and guardian. We were at the school this morning. We spoke to about 500 kids in 3 different assemblies, and we are introduced. This man's grandson killed this man's son, and here they are together in the spirit of compassion and forgiveness. We've been together 27 years. He's African American. although I was kidding by that, JP, because I was telling him, I was born in Kenya. I was telling him I'm the African American. I was born in Africa.
Exactly.
He's Christian. I am Muslim. His kid killed my son, and we are brothers. Wow. I mean, this man would do anything for me as I would for him. So the relationship and that bond we have, although we met in some very extenuating circumstances, very challenging circumstances, but through that ability to have an open heart, and my attitude was that I'm not here screaming retribution and revenge because your grandson killed my son. Rather, what I really see here is we both lost a son. It's hard for him too, to have his grandson take a life of an innocent, unarmed human being. And I'm here because I've started a foundation to stop this mayhem of kids killing kids. And I need to ask for your help because it's a big job. So will you help me? Now that took an open heart, because it was through that open heart. And once I said that, his name is Ples, he felt that energy. He saw that my heart was open, and he was very quick to take my hand of forgiveness. And after he expressed his condolences, he says, of course, I'll help you. And he's as passionate about this work as I am, and we're together for 27 years, and we'll still be together till this is over. So it doesn't matter what kind of a business you are. You rely on your stakeholders. So who are your stakeholders? Your customers, your employees, right? And your relationship within the community. And all of those relationships will become a lot more stronger. And your customers may become more loyal, knowing that because you are a business and have an open heart, hopefully you are also doing some good work in the community. One of my books is Leadership for the Greater Good, where I talk about that if you are in business and if you are a leader, right, you don't just live at home and work. You live in community. And the tendency here is you get an undergraduate degree, then you get a master's degree, then you get a PhD. And mostly it's me. Maybe you look at the welfare of your families. But what are you doing for community? So we need leaders that have a triad of competency. Sure, they are leaders and they're very good at whatever their business is or their profession is. That's important, right? But they need to take on societal ills, much like I've dealt with youth violence. I wasn't trained in it. My background is international finance. My education was in mathematics and finance. But I've done well at it. Again, it took that open heart to move into doing this work. So if you're a leader, you take on some societal ills and try and get solutions that are not only viable and impactful, but affordable. Right. So I'll give you an example. It costs $11,547 to provide free K through 12 education in California. It costs $148,000 a year, which is more than $400 a day to incarcerate a youth for 1 year. Our Safe School model costs $50 a year. It's a no-brainer, it's affordable. So that I believe that that if you are, because what would you do without community? I mean, there would be no, build show like you have, and hospitals and schools and police and everything that we take for granted. But I always, when I have an opportunity to speak, which I do a lot to leaders, I tell them, what are you doing for your community? And that, I think, is something that needs to get out, especially in the divided world we live in. And the third triad of competency is to espouse, teach, and role model strong ethical, moral, and spiritual values. So when I ask you, JP, how many leaders you know that have this triad of competency, but they're very good in their field of endeavor, that they've taken and solved societal ills and demonstrate a high level of morality and ethics and morals and spiritual values? How many leaders come to mind? Not many, but there are a few. I'm glad that, in the work that I have done, I have met many. It doesn't matter. And in my book, I've featured about a dozen of them. They come both genders, they come from different nationalities, different races, different religions, because those distinctions don't matter. But they are essentially in this area where they are providing good service. And I think, again, it takes an open heart to serve community. There's a great quote from Rabindranath Tagore. He's an Indian sage. And here's his quote. He says, "I dreamt life was joy. I woke up and I found out life was service. I acted and behold, service is joy." Again, it takes an open heart to serve. Yeah.
That's great.
So I didn't do this work, JP, when my son was alive. I traveled the world, did international business. I speak a half a dozen languages. But I can tell you I'm more fulfilled now because I've given 1,000 presentations to over 2 million kids. I have over 150,000 letters, and each of them will break your heart. That the journey has been so fulfilling. Not that I don't miss my son, of course I do, but I wouldn't be doing this if I hadn't lost him. And that tragedy opened my heart wide open. But I believe he came to my life to put me on my purpose. And I believe we all have a spiritual purpose. I think once we find it, we always have a tailwind and the road rises to meet you and the universe is your partner. So again, I think that maybe this inspires your audience to spend more time in service. Because it's even there's an Albert Schweitzer is one of my favorite American philosopher, and here's what he said. He says, "I don't know what your destiny will be, but what I do know, those of you who will find happiness will have sought and learn how to serve."
Yes, it's all about service. And I love how you're talking about understanding the business of business and your life in the aspect of the relationships, how that leads to understanding the business, right? And understanding how we can bring true joy to our lives through service and understanding what our purpose truly is, right? Which leads in the build framework to I, which is implement strategies, right? So how about, and I know you have, hundreds and you could talk for hours on this, but just, if you pick like maybe the top 2 or 3 strategies that you could offer to our audience to kind of implement in their lives as it relates to delivering excellence and living with an open heart. You mentioned you meditate, every day, all these other things. Are there other things that come to mind from the standpoint of our listeners that could really give them a strategy to implement to really join us on this journey?
I think that one of the things I talk about is catch people doing something right.
I love that.
A leader, mostly we catch them doing something wrong, but you don't inspire people. Most people, especially when you have employees, right? And you catch them doing something right, pat their shoulders and acknowledge them. That needs an open heart. And they will do more for you. If you walk through the offices of the Tariq Khamisa Foundation, you will see how passionate and dedicated our employees are. Because we walk our talk and we talk our walk. And the main thing here, as you talk about strategy, is to move from a punitive mindset. Because our systems are very punitive, whether it is schools, whether it is corporations, whether it's prisons, whether it's court systems. We need to move from a punitive system to a restorative system. So what does that really mean? So let me take a minute and explain that. Because, in the criminal code in the US, and I'm sure the same is true in Australia, was written based on what the pilgrims brought with them from England. So in a monarchy, the queen or the king owns both the land and the people. So when there's a crime committed, it's always against the king or the queen. Now in America, we don't have monarchy, neither do you have in Australia. So the state takes that role. So in my case, it was the state of California against Tony Hicks. Restorative mindset goes totally different. What does the king or the queen have to do with the crime? Crime happens in the context of community. And there are three parties. There's a victim, there's the offender, and then there's community. And justice is not served till these three things are dealt with in a humane way. So first, you've got to make the victim whole. We can't bring my son back. We're working with the grandfather and now the kid who killed my son. I met him when he was 19, stayed with him. I was at his parole hearing when he was 39. And I've been trying to advocate for his release. Even the commissioner was in tears. He says, I've been doing this work for 25 years. I've never had a victim's father come and advocate for the offender's release. I said, you release him. Because he's a different guy because of my hand of forgiveness. He can save many kids. And he's on stage now with me, telling kids when I was 11, I joined a gang. When I was 14, I killed Mr. Khamisa's son. I wish I could turn the clock back. How many 11 years old is it going to change? And he's very passionate about it. He's finally out a couple of years ago. Wow. So it's meaningful. Less kids are ending up dead or ending up in prison. And that's meaningful that my son did not die in vain. The second part is to bring the offender back into society as a functioning and a contributing member. We've done that. And the third thing is to heal the community, which we do by doing programs in schools, or even what we are talking about right now. So that's the restorative mindset, that when there is an altercation, and there's always challenges even in a business or in a corporation, right? Don't go to the punitive strategy. Go to the restorative strategy. How do we take this particular incident? Yeah. And I give you a story. I did a program for an international company in London, and the CEO had fired one of the consultants. They actually were in culture shaping and leadership. And there was about 40 of them that I trained the London team, which worked in EMEA, which is Europe, Middle East, and Africa. And there was this big elephant in the room that nobody was quite happy the way this lady was fired, who was a consultant. And finally, this German consultant, which worked for the company, said, I'm not happy how you fired Susan. I'll just use the name Susan. She contributed a lot to our model, where we teach leadership and we teach conflict resolution. I'm not complete with it. As soon as he said that, 4 other consultants said the same thing. Well, I worked with Susan too, and she was. So, and I've created this a workshop I do for a day and a half to create unity from conflict using the principles of restorative practices. So he was on the spot, but he took responsibility. The first thing he said is, I take responsibility. I did not do this right. And I want to apologize to you. And I will reach out to Susan and apologize to her and make sure that we do this right. And I'll come back and report to you and make sure that she's happy with the severance package. And I'll process the whole situation with her and have you and we'll report back to you, because you are my team. There's 30 of them. You're great consultants. You have a lot of value for this business. So I acknowledged him. I said, I said, I really want to acknowledge you. Most CEO would be defensive. They wouldn't go this route. And they would essentially, when you're looking at CEOs, they have really high egos. And I'm sure I don't have to explain that, and that he didn't show any signs of ego. He was very vulnerable, which was very good to see. Again, he had an open heart. So when I asked him, I said, okay, I acknowledge you, and thank you for being vulnerable, but my concern is this: how do we make sure this doesn't happen again? So then he went into this contemplation, and there was this long silence, almost uncomfortable, because he's thinking, how do I answer this? And after a long silence, he said to me, what do you suggest? So he threw the ball in my court. So I told him, I said, you know what? These things don't happen in a vacuum. I'm sure there's conversations around the water fountain. There's always something milling in the background. I said, are you willing to have your consultants that work, that report to you, call you on it if they see something like this? Not only about letting some person go, but anything in this business that they may think is not right. Can they call you on it? And at that time, he didn't look at me anymore. He looked at his team and says, absolutely. He says, you are the strength of this company. I want to be a better CEO. My office door is open, and you can call on me anytime. If I make a mistake, or if you hear something, or if you don't like something, I want to be the best possible CEO. So I give you full permission to call me on it. At that point, the first guy who was a German, got up, shook his hands, and gave him a bear hug. And Germans are not known for giving hugs, right? And the entire group, the entire energy changed. So I think this is something that can be cultivated, where you move, because I think we're very conditioned to be a punitive system. Restorative justice, which actually is taking a lot of tracking, which I'm really happy to see. I was just in Chicago at the NACRJ conference. Actually, I went with Tony. He's the kid who killed my son. We spoke together. And the National Association of Community and Restorative Justice started in 2014, which is less than 10 years ago, right? It'll be 10 years in 2024. At their first meeting, they had 40 participants. In this one, they had 700. Wow. And it's all about restorative justice. And it's all about using the principle of moving from a punitive to a restorative mindset. You heal the victim, you bring the offender back into society as a contributing, functioning member, and you heal the community, which happened in this company.
Absolutely. Right? And I love how that's a very specific strategy that you can implement with an open heart and apply that to whatever situation you have in your life, if you're listening to this as a participant on this amazing call. That leads us then into lead and inspire. We've talked kind of around the edges on a lot of leadership things in this whole conversation, but if you look specifically at lead and inspire in regards to our lens of delivering excellence, right, with an open heart, what comes to mind to share with our audience about the importance and the way to actually lead and inspire with an open heart? Because it's a great concept,
question.
But yeah,
actually,
how does it work?
Teach this even to the kids in school, that if you have a decision to make that is important, or if you have to take an action that is important, don't just rely on your intellect. I have a good friend that says a mind is a dangerous place to go by yourself. Because it will justify anything. There's nothing wrong with it, a good intellect. Even Einstein says we must take care not to make intellect our God. Sure, it has powerful muscles, but no personality. It cannot lead. It can only serve. This is Einstein, the smartest man in the last century and to date in this century. But if you have an important decision to make or an action to take, go to your mind first, because the more education you have, the better you are able to analyze the pros and the cons. Does it make sense? Does it not make sense? Sure. It's like a computer, essentially. Yes. If it makes sense, then go to your heart and you ask the question, does it feel good, right, and just? Because we all have an idea or a mindset of what is good, right, and just. Mm-hmm. If it tells you it sounds good, right, and just, don't stop there. And we've all done things, we thought, well, that makes a lot of sense. And that really feels good, right, and just. And then later we say, well, why did I do that? Especially when you're teenagers, yeah? Take the third step. Go to your spirit. One of my books is called The Secrets of the Bulletproof Spirit, How to Bounce Back from Life's Hardest Hits. go to your spirit, which is mightier than your intellect and your emotions. The spirit, if you believe in a higher power, never makes a mistake. It always creates decisions and action that are in the highest good for you, the other person, and the universe. So when you go to your spirit, you ask exactly what you just said, JP. Is it inspiring? Now, if it makes sense, if it feels good, right, and just, and if it's inspiring, well, that's going to be an awesome decision. I never act unless I get a check on all of those three boxes. And it's important to do that third step. Now, a lot of your audiences may be evolved, they may be living in their heads and their hearts, which is good. But I meet very few people that are able to essentially integrate their head, their heart, and their spirit. It makes sense, it feels good, right, and just, and it is inspiring. It's a good way to lead. I don't lead from my intellect anymore. I lead from my spirit. I meditate 2 hours a day. On my website, azimkhamisa.com, on the homepage, if you scroll down to the bottom, there's a preamble. I meditate 3 different times and do 2 different things at those 3 different times, a total of 2 hours. And you can listen to the preamble once so you understand the methodology, which I perfected. I've been meditating now for 50 years, almost 50 years. And then there are 2 guided meditation. One is on forgiveness, because I teach that. And the other one is on manifesting your life's mission, which is a good meditation for leaders.
Yes.
So that is how you connect with your spirit. That is when you are able to say, well, that makes sense. That feels good, right, and just. And when you speak to your spirit through meditation, it will tell you whether this is an inspiring decision or not. And if it's not, don't act.
Absolutely. I think that will take everyone's leadership, wherever they are, to the next level. Absolutely. Thank you so much for that. And we've been talking about deliver excellence through this whole conversation, but is there anything else that you haven't mentioned already as it relates to the category of delivering excellence and truly living with that, feel it mentality, that open heart?
Yeah, and I think to me, I work very hard to keep my heart open. And I think that it takes practice. And I think that the biggest culprit is judging. So the one thing I think, if you want to have an open heart and have excellence, an open heart, the shortest distance to your spirit is through an open heart. Yeah. So if you have an open heart, you'll be able to meditate better, and you'll be able to better connect with your spirit. And that's a good place to lead. But if there's one thing, if you want to get more excellence in your life, stop judging. Yeah. Yes. I mean, I learned this from His Holiness the Dalai Lama. He will tell you your enemy can teach you a lot. And there's a story about him that brought tears to my eyes when I first met him. As you know, he was ousted in Tibet by the Chinese, I think 1957. He was a young man then. The Chinese, when they took over Tibet, they killed 1.6 million Tibetans. There's only like 6.5 million of them. And they destroyed 640,000 monasteries, because the Tibetan way of governance was that every little village had a monastery, and all the adolescent youth went to the monastery for 2 years, much like at one point they did here in service, to learn the Tibetan way, because the Dalai Lama was both the secular and the spiritual leader of the Tibetan people. Actually, the most compassionate, humane form of governance the world has ever seen. Unfortunately, it doesn't exist anymore. And they captured a lot of the high-ranking monks, and one of the monks they captured was the Dalai Lama's very good friend. He went to a monastery school when both of them were in their adolescent years. And they imprisoned him for 25 years. And I don't have to tell you about Chinese torture. But because of the Dalai Lama's international reputation, he was finally able to release his friend, who then goes through China and goes to pay his homage to his spiritual and secular leader who lives in exile in Dharamsala, India. And the Dalai Lama was telling us his story. He says, I was so excited to see him. I'd seen him for a while. We hugged and we sat down and we drank tea and we had our best cookies. And my friend tells me while he was in Chinese prison, he had this impending danger in his life. So I asked him, were you afraid the Chinese were going to kill you? And his friend said, no, I was not afraid of dying. The impending danger in my life when I was in prison with the Chinese for 25 years was losing compassion for them.
Wow.
The impending danger in my life was losing compassion for the Chinese who murdered 1.6 million of my brothers and sisters and destroyed 640,000 monasteries. And I got it. What would I replace if I lost compassion for the kid who took my son's life?
Yes.
It's again vibrating here at those high vibratory emotions. This monk was evolved to always stay there. So you know, the point is that he didn't judge, right?
Yes.
He felt compassionate for his enemy. So I think one thing that if you want to create excellence in your life, in your relationships, business or personal or otherwise, stop judging and keep your hearts open. Yeah?
100%.
Open heart doesn't judge, JP. Open heart doesn't judge.
100%. Well, thank you so much for that. And as we wrap things up today, I mean, how can people get a hold of you? What's the best way for them to do that, to get more involved in what you're doing?
You can put my website on there, azimkhamisa.com.
Of course.
And my email is azim@azimkhamisa.com. It's the best way to communicate with me. I'm very happy to get emails. I do a lot of work in corporations. I also do a 2-day workshop, which is in person. With COVID now, I do 4 half-day workshops. In fact, I'm doing one on the 11th and the 12th, which is Friday, Saturday. And then again, the next Friday, Saturday, which is the 17th, which is the 18th and the 19th. It's 4 half days, and I do a deep dive. We call it Strong in Spirit. But essentially, it's developing super resiliency. And that's very short notice for your audience, because this show won't, we are filming today. But I always, I think it's important to say that over the year, even in 2023, I will do 3 or 4 workshops, and people that are interested in it can join. I have 5 books, you mentioned that. I do individual counseling. I do a lot of speaking, given over 700 keynotes. So they're welcome to reach out, and I'm very happy to spread forgiveness, because I truly believe that that's the portal to get to peace. And the Lord knows, and we all know, we need more peace in the world. You get more forgiving people, hopefully one day we have peace in the world.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. It's been such an honor to have you with us here today. I really, truly appreciate it from my heart.
Well, thank you, JP. Thank you for having me. It's an honor, and it's wonderful to meet you.
Thank you so much.
And I see that you have an open heart too, JP.
Well, I appreciate that, and we all are a work in progress.
I think you have a great show, by the way. I love the concept of the Build Show and what you are doing, and trying to create a better world. It's exactly what I'm trying to do, and that's
Absolutely.
what your goal is. And
we're all doing our part.
Yeah, and I think the Build Show is a gift to Australia and hopefully to the rest of the world. Yeah.
Thank you for that. Thank you so very much. And thank all of you for joining us here as well. For more great resources to help improve your best self, make sure to check out thebuildframework.com. That's it for this episode. I'm JP. We'll see you next time on The Build Show.